All right, this is part 2 of writing a review roadmap. When we talked last, we left off on number 5, which we've put all the processes in place, and we talked about writing all the way through the conclusion. Number 5 is kind of like a checklist for you to kind of go over your personal review. And so I just kind of wanted to touch on a few things before I close out the screencast. So number 5 says to look critically at your draft, get response, read it to someone, a parent, a sibling, a friend, to kind of get some feedback if like you've covered all your bases, if they feel like it's an effective review. And then the revision process, which is so important. And I think that it's a step that a lot of you are kind of skimping on in your for your final draft. And so you cannot replace a critical read through, a very thorough proofing. It's going to catch 95% of the errors that you're making in your essay if you just read very carefully through with a fine-tooth comb. So once you have a complete draft, read it over carefully, think about your evaluation. Think about your reasons and your evidence that you provided to support and the way that you appeal to your audience. And if possible, ask others for feedback. Be sure to give your readers a clear sense of your assignment or purpose and your intended audience. Here are some questions that you can use to critically examine your draft. And this is not like proofing wise for like grammar and mechanics. All of that's so important, so make sure that you're doing that as well. Is the evaluation stated explicitly? Is there a clear thesis, or if not, is one needed? How well does the introduction capture the reader's interests? How well does it establish your authority as a reviewer? Remember that it's all part of establishing yourself. Why should somebody listen to what you have to say about this particular subject? Have you established your authority as a reviewer? Does it make it clear what the review is about? How will it engage your audience's interest? And how else might it begin? Number 3, is the subject described or summarized sufficiently for your audience? Is there a balance between background information that you think they're going to need and that evaluation? And number 4, like, what's the balance? Does the balance seem right for the subject and the purpose? What are the criteria for evaluation? Have you clearly developed those criteria, and have you stated them explicitly? And if not, do you feel like listing them explicitly is something that you need to do? Are they appropriate for subject and audience? Are there any other criteria that should be considered? What good reasons and evidence support your evaluation? Will your audience be persuaded? And not persuaded to take action, but you always want to leave it as they could go and take action if they chose to after reading. Like, do they have the information that they need, the evidence, the reasoning to be able to do that? What other viewpoints did you consider, and how well did you respond to those views? Are there any other views you should consider? How would you describe your stance and tone? Are they appropriate and authoritative? What words or details create that impression? How is your draft organized? Is it easy to follow with clear transitions from one point to the next? What about design? Should any material be set off as a list or a chart or a table or a graph? Are there any illustrations? And if not, should there be? Is the style, your choice of words, your types of sentences, your level of formality, is it appropriate for your intended audience? How does the draft conclude? Is the conclusion decisive and satisfying, or how else might it conclude? And is this a fair review? Even if the readers do not agree with the evaluation, would they consider it fair? Think about that too. And you see so many people, like if you ever look on Yelp about a restaurant, and one bad service doesn't necessarily mean that the restaurant is bad. However, consumers take into account these views. So one bad service and one bad review can really alter people's perception. So think about that. Is what you said fair? Have you trashed a particular restaurant's thing or a movie or something like that? Are you being biased? Have you really thought through everything carefully? If someone read it, even if they don't agree with it, would they consider it to be a fair review? Okay, so those are all things to kind of keep in mind there with your writing a review roadmap.